everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Top 10 Distribution KPIs and Why They Matter. Our goal today is to provide you with beneficial insights that will help you get the most out of your enterprise technology investments. We'll kick off the session with brief introductions to today's experts. Then we'll quickly move on to the main event, a thoughtful discussion on the top 10 distribution KPIs with industry experts from Ultra Consultants and Oracle NetSuite. I'd like to take a brief moment to let you know that Ultra Consultants is serving as your host today and tell you a little bit more about who we are. Since 1994, manufacturers and distributors throughout North America, as well as companies with global operations, have teamed with Ultra as trusted advisors and industry best practice experts to guide them through their business process improvement and enterprise technology transformation journeys. Please feel free to reach out to me if you would like to learn more about Ultra Consultants or visit us at ultraconsultants.com. This is Kristen Renda, Marketing Program Manager at Ultra and your moderator for today's webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce today's experts. From Ultra, we have Senior Consultant Dave Saunders. Dave has more than 25 years of experience helping mid-size and large manufacturing organizations and wholesale distribution companies leverage modern ERP technologies, optimize their operations, and accelerate their business processes. I'd also like to welcome our special guest expert, Asad Ahmed, Principal Industry Solution Advisor with Oracle NetSuite. Asad has more than 15 years experience in B2B online marketing, customer acquisition, SEO, SEM, e-commerce, and cloud computing. And with that, I will hand it over to Asad to give us a brief introduction to Oracle NetSuite.
Thank you for that, Kristen. Hi, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you guys are joining us from. I hear somebody is joining us from Hawaii, so very early morning to everyone. My name is Asad Ahmed, and I'll be talking a little bit about NetSuite and NetSuite's background. NetSuite is the first cloud company that started back in 1998. To date, we have over 26,000 customers using us worldwide in over 215 plus countries and independent territories right now. And one of the best things about NetSuite is all of those 26,000 plus customers are on the same exact version of the ERP. NetSuite is a full suite, so we are not only an ERP solution, we are everything an enterprise would need, starting from ERP, CRM, e-commerce, financials, and the list just goes on and on. And we've been seeing tremendous growth on our part. They've grown at a record pace over the course of the years, with adding in about 4,000 plus logos in the last 12 months, and with over 100 companies IPOing on NetSuite. With that, I'll bring Dave, the all-star for today, to come and kind of start taking us through the presentation for the day.
Thanks, Asad. I am Dave Saunders from Ultra. Thanks again for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about top 10 distribution KPIs and why they matter. You know, when you start making a list of KPIs, there's a very long laundry list of KPIs you can use. But we decided to focus on 10, and really those 10 are organized around customer, around operations, and around profitability. Asad and I are going to split the 10 up and start off with customer focused.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Dave. So the first one that we're looking at as a KPI is on-time delivery. And I think when you really start thinking about where the rubber meets the road is when your customers are purchasing from you. And one of the biggest and the most important and the critical thing that we're looking at is, when am I going to get my products delivered to my door? So on-time delivery is as critical as it gets. And as we all know, there are multiple different factors that can come into on-time delivery. Kind of think about it from your side of the fence. You go and you start purchasing something. I'll just pick on Amazon for the day because I think most of us have bought something from them in the last month at least, right? You'll look at what is the product, when is it going to be delivered, and that's really going to be the baseline for your decision making. Do you buy it from seller A, seller B, or seller C in there? You're looking for the product to be delivered to you very quickly. So when you got to start thinking about that part, right? On-time delivery, a couple of things come into play is like, where is the inventory? How is the inventory being delivered? When can it be delivered? Are there any challenges when it comes to supply chain with that? So there's numerous factors that come into play with on-time delivery when we start thinking about our customers. And one of the most critical things is being able to give them an accurate time so they know what they're able to do. Aside from the consumer role, your products could be, you could be a distributor supplying widgets to your customers that need to use it into their projects so they can take into account, hey, if this delivery time, is it a week, is it a month, is it a year, that I'm going to get it or not. So that those things start becoming very, very critical for them. And when you start thinking about on-time delivery, the shorter the delivery time, the higher the customer satisfaction. Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and those are great points. And Asad, you mentioned Amazon, and we often reference the Amazon effect, if you will. And it's that you've placed an order, immediately when it's going to be there. Most of the time it's there on time. How many deliveries am I going to get? And not only that, but oftentimes people think, that's great for, B2C, business to consumer business. But frankly, even in the business to business environment, a lot of people are coming up there, even in their personal lives, they're used to that Amazon effect, and they're wondering, well, as a business owner or a buyer, why can't I experience the exact same thing on the on-time delivery that everybody else gets? So they're setting that matter, and that not only on-time delivery, but in a lot of different other aspects of the business. They're have those same expectations. The second one we're going to talk about is really customer complaints. And the importance of customer complaints, we'd like to think we never have customer complaints, but the reality is we all know they exist. And trying to ignore them is the worst thing you can do. So it's really important to go out, figure out, how can I capture, am I encouraging, not that you want to encourage the complaints, but make sure that you have open dialogue with your customers so that if there is something wrong, they feel comfortable in sharing with you. I think most of our customers would not probably have a concern or hesitation to tell us something's wrong, but it's capturing that and then do the analysis, understand what's causing them. There are a lot of different reasons for the complaints. Did they get the wrong product? Was the pricing wrong? It's really to dig deep into the causes of those complaints and figure out what can we do to fix it. Asad mentioned, on-time delivery is, there's those little things can make a big difference whether you're successful in landing the customer and in keeping that customer. We all know that, over years, it's a lot easier to keep a customer, keep them satisfied than trying to go out and get a new one. So customer complaints is an important aspect of understanding truly how are you servicing your customers. Asad, any thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of look at it as customer complaints as really related to customer satisfaction. And the more satisfied your customers feel, the more often they're going to come back to you. Again, it's, you're visiting your favorite restaurant. You'll like them. You're satisfied with what they do for you. You're going to keep coming back. And the same thing with customer complaints. You want to reduce that. And also another thing is when you ask them their opinion, when you ask them to share what's happened, it's not only does it help you fix what's going on in your organization, so the next customer that comes around or who are the next or the same customer, you're able to provide them with better service, but also from a customer standpoint, it's essential for them to be felt that they've been heard. They have been able to share their feedback, and it's going to be taken into account next time they're going to do business with you. So I think customer complaints, customer satisfaction is a very critical component. And that kind of leads us right to our third KPI that we want to talk about is the total order cycle time. Again, from the time I place an order to the time that order gets shipped to my door, what is happening in between? This is another very critical KPI, again, related to the customer satisfaction, however you want to term that out. It's very critical that you want to reduce that out. Again, this is one of those KPIs, the shorter, the smaller the number, the better it is off for you, right? Again, if the total order cycle time is long, kind of think about, you go to, again, I'll use a restaurant analogy just for another 1 minute over here. You order your meal today, and it takes them 45 minutes to deliver that meal. You really are at that point, it's like, what happened? Where did my product go? Where is my order? Same things come into play. And this is basically goes into deeper into other aspects of your organization. What are the different things that could impact the total order cycle time for you? Where is the inventory delayed to you that you cannot get into your own manufacturing or whatever your other internal processes are to ship it out? Is there supply chain disruptions that are coming into play? Is there supply chain disruptions on the horizon? I bring up supply chain because I think the last year and a half, that's been top of mind for everybody at this point in time. People are now thinking about, hey, is being able to track your inventory, demand planning that is associated with that. Other things that have been people are now looking, or organization are looking into taking into account would be things along the lines with, hey, is just-in-time inventory is what I need to stick to as a model, or do I need to go into just in case? If I go into just in case, how does it impact my profitability? So you'll see that there is a chain effect that comes into play. So when you start thinking about the total order cycle time, it's very critical to start taking those things into account. And then going back to our previous conversation about customer satisfaction, you want to be able to tell your customers when you're going to be able to deliver those goods out for you there. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, those are great points. I couldn't have said it any better. The other aspect I would add is, included in that is, not only in it's time from you placing the order to the time you get the complete shipment. So, if you've got an order and it's split across multiple shipments, that's lengthening that total order cycle time, but it's also driving your expenses up as when you receive it, because every time you have to receive the order, there's additional expenses in it. Are you having to issue a separate check for it? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. So, that cycle time is, and it's becoming much more pronounced and focused. And, I think a lot of us are experiencing that supply chain, that we through the COVID, that our supply chains have gotten disrupted, right? How frustrated have you've gotten with your suppliers, and your customers have gotten probably frustrated with you if they don't understand those disruptions. So real important KPI.
100%. And just last one thing I want to add into that one would be, and is that if your supply chain is getting disrupted, your KPIs are getting impacted, is it also leading you going into diversification of your supply chain, so you don't only have one channel that you're able to purchase your goods from, but having multiple different channels available? Didn't mean to take your time on that one, David. I know you're really excited about the next KPI that's right about to come up.
Yeah, so the next one, funny enough, so throughput, when I ran warehouses, distribution centers, that throughput was the first and foremost KPI that I was always managed by. Evaluated how are we doing in the warehouse, and it's the first thing I always look to. But it's really, it says cases per man hour. I mean, there are a lot of different subsets of this, but this really, as a distribution center or warehouse manager, it gave me a really quick look at, how productive are we taking care of all of the cases. If you're mailing, cases or eaches, whatever is appropriate for environment, how effectively are we processing them? And this is every man hour, person hour, if you want to put it that way, that is in the warehouse. It's all of those cases that we're handling divided by the total man hours, person hours that we're using to ship them out the door. It's a great, quick way to find out, just again, how effectively are you running the warehouse? Are there opportunities, when you benchmark things, are there opportunities to, maybe add some automation to help improve that? If you're in the eaches, if you happen to be distributing to consumers in some manner, you're handling a lot of eaches, this is one that can really bog you down if you don't keep an eye on it very tightly.
Absolutely. And with eaches, is there any kind of further down the Dave, when we start talking about profitability, how does it impact your profitability? Is it when you're dealing with eaches, the man hours associated with processing that order, breaking things down? Again, does that generate waste? Is that costing you more? Again, a bunch of different things that come into play there, right? And kind of talking a little bit more on the operational side, the next one that we're going to be talking about is inventory accuracy. How much inventory is the right amount of inventory for you to have on hand, or in your supply chain available to you, that you can quickly get that. Again, inventory accuracy is, you don't have the inventory, what are you going to sell, right? So that's the key thing. Making sure that having the right amount, the right product mix as well. Hey, again, we'll take an example of the consumer side of it, right? If you sell medium sizes more than the small sizes, you want to make sure you have the accurate planning around that. If you want to stock more of the mediums versus the smalls, because you don't sell those that many, because you don't want to be out the other way. And then you also have your revenue tied up in inventory that you're not going to be selling there. So demand planning then becomes one of those critical pieces that are there. Looking at historicals that you have, are there certain events that have happened over the course of time that have brought in spikes? Are those events going to be repeated events on your side? Hey, so we know that holidays are going to be a repeat event. Hopefully, COVID is not. Then we all ran out of toilet paper at that point, right? I had to mention the toilet paper because I think that was one of the KPIs that was there. But again, kind of start thinking about those parts, right? Also, when you talk about inventory accuracy, then goes again, KPIs. The funny thing about KPIs, all of them are interrelated. So again, going back to the supply chain side of things, how is the supply chain impact affecting the inventory accuracy on your part? Another key thing when you start thinking about inventory accuracy is, again, going to a little bit on the profitability or non-profitability side of things, is having extra products. How is that impacting your side of the fence? Are you tying up finances in there? Is that affecting your profitability side of it? Is that taking up warehouse space that could be allocated for something else that you need to utilize it for? Do you need to now go into expansion? Is it a forced expansion? So again, all of those things start becoming very, very critical. And tying that up with customer orders, getting that planning done correctly plays a lot of fruits down the road for you, so that you have the right products and getting it to the customers in time without having to store a ton of goods there.
Yeah, so those are great points. I take it down to another level when I think of inventory accuracy. I'm thinking just when I do the counts, if I go to a pick slot and the system says there are 10 cases there, are there really 10 cases in that slot? And I mean, that's kind of the basis. For me, that's the basis for everything Asad just talked about from a production, from a planning perspective and making sure I've got the right inventory to serve those orders. But it really starts with, do I keep accurate counts of my inventory? If I'm in a B2C environment, I go to order online, again, using Amazon. If they're down to the last 3 or 4, they're going to tell you, hey, 3 left. And there's a pretty high confidence level that there really are 3 left. There's nothing worse than placing an order for, you think 10 cases, it shows that there's 20, and you get shorted all 10 because, in fact, there wasn't anything there. So that goes back to your customer complaints, but it becomes the basis for, planning, making sure that the buyers have confidence that if it says that there are 10 there, hey, they know that that's accurate. Or now, Asad made the reference of buying up more because I don't have faith in really what's there. So I need to make sure I've got inventory in it. So there's a lot of implications associated with that inventory accuracy number.
Perfect. Thank you for adding that part out, David.
Yep.
I think you're now coming up to your next one.
Yeah, and Asad mentioned this already. So capacity, there is a sweet spot in running warehouses, and I think the numbers run anywhere from 80 to 90%. Again, depending upon how much how much robotics are in your warehouse and automation. But there is a sweet spot that your warehouse is going to operate optimally at, and that's a capacity. And if you get too little inventory, does that mean that people are having to drive all over the warehouse to find stuff? I may not have the right inventory. In-house, I may not have enough inventory. I've got too much now. People are tripping all over each other, potentially creating safety issues. Can I find the inventory? So it's really important to understand, based on your building and your experience and what others are doing, truly what is optimal warehouse capacity. The other thing is, once you get above a certain point, if you're strategically looking out and you realize I'm hitting that 85, 90%, and I'm not even into my peak season, well, when I get to peak season and I've got even more inventory, what are you doing with it? Are you going to put it on trailers sitting out in your parking lot? Are you going to lease them outside storage? What exactly are you going to do with it? So there's really importance of understanding what that number is and what's really that sweet spot for your facility.
Definitely. And speaking of facilities, we come right up to the next one, safety, right? I think worker safety is critical. I think it's when you start thinking about your workers, the more satisfied they are at their working location, their working environment, the better output that they'll be giving out on their side of things, right? Safety is very critical. One of the things, it also has a direct impact on cost for you as well. And in certain cases, it could also have a cost impact on the number of people that would want to stick around and work at that point in time. If it's an unsafe environment, we already know that there are labor shortages out there right now. That's one of the things that you'll see in news cycles on a daily basis. And again, if there's some things that could be done, making a safer environment, better environment, easier environment for people to work in, that would drive up the employee morale for you, which would at the end of the day have a better impact. Because again, if you don't have the right amount of workers available to do the work for you, it's going to have a direct impact on the on-time delivery KPI that you're looking at. So again, what you'll start noticing is these KPIs are really intermingled on their part. Then it's going to have you. It's basically you'll see ripple effects across your organization. So again, when you start thinking about safety, it is very critical to provide an environment for the workers that they're able to work easily in.
Yeah, great points, Todd. And when we're consulting in warehouse facilities, we tend to kind of put a layer of lean principles on top of everything that we do. And one of the key things for lean is it neat and organized and everything's in its right place, which leads to a safe environment. So again, I, being a warehouse manager in a former life, as they say, warehouse employee safety is got to be #1 priority, because without them being out there to do the work, nothing's going to go out the door.
And if I'll just think about one other thing, right? You mentioned earlier, as being the warehouse manager, when you go to the bin to pick the goods, do you have those 10 there? Or are people leaving if you don't have proper procedures in place to put them away, which could also, if they're not put away properly, they could impact the safety, because again, there's a bunch of different things that can go wrong in a warehouse. You want to make sure that you have proper procedures defined. And once you have those proper procedures defined, that really impact the safety. And then when next time you go to pick and see if that bin has 10 pieces of product X that you were looking for, that your system shows that they're really sitting there. So again, going back, everything is tied together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Todd. The next one on the list is probably one of the first KPIs when I first joined the workforce out of college. My boss, this was one of his favorites. We talked about it at every staff meeting, revenue per employee. And the importance of it really, I mean, coming right out of college, I understood the concept behind it. But where I really saw it start to play is, if your revenue per employee is flat, then, as your business grows, you're not getting more efficient. And that's really the message he was trying to convey is, hey, we're pushing for aggressive growth, but you know what, whatever that revenue per employee number was, he used that as a gauge to say, I can't add people every time I add dollar sales, right? It's how do I do it more productively and effectively? And he used this number to really gauge that and monitor it. And certainly if we ever saw it go down, there was a cause for alarm, because then we were becoming, as an organization, that much less productive. And the revenue per employee, it was all employees. It wasn't just sales employees. It wasn't just warehouse. It was every employee in the company. Just as a gauge to say, okay, I can't keep throwing bodies at it. You've heard that adage, I'm sure, many times. You just can't keep throwing bodies at work. You need to find ways to do things smarter and more effectively. So this was a great KPI to gauge that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think this ties back to, if we can divide it or section this customer satisfaction, operational and profitability, this one kind of falls between that profitability and operational side of things, right? As you mentioned, you cannot just keep adding employees in. Maybe that's when you start analyzing, hey, are certain sales costing you more than they're bringing in terms of revenue? Is that a key focus is that because you have to throw more man hours or person hours at those orders? So again, do you continue to do this, fulfill those orders, supply or sell that product, or do you shift focus to higher profitable goods? Because that's going to, at the end of the day, increase that revenue per employee for you there. So, and that kind of also brings us, again, operational side, thinking about asset utilization. In terms of when you start thinking about asset utilization, just like you have employees, revenue per employee, you want to have your utilization of your assets high at the same time, right? Again, when you kind of start thinking about your warehouses, how much of my warehouse space am I using at that point? When you have equipment, how much am I running that equipment at peak? Am I running it? Am I utilizing it enough hours on those? Or am I just taking depreciation over them over the course of the years, and I'm not utilizing that equipment to the fullest potential? Again, if you go, we all talk about, Dave mentioned being in the warehouse, managing that. I worked in warehouses, and you have total number of hours in a forklift. Again, you want those to be running all the time, right? Because again, the more the forklift moves, the more the goods move, that means the more orders you're fulfilling, the more customers are getting their goods, and so on and so forth. Building capacity, Dave mentioned earlier, 85 to 90% is a good number to have. Does that also kind of starts going in and saying, hey, if I'm utilizing my warehousing, my employees, my goods, and my trucks, whatever those pieces of equipment are for you at a very high rate in an off-peak season, that means you need to start planning for your peak seasons, because that you need to start adding those pieces into place now, so that you're not running after them last minute. Again, going back to the supply chain disruptions that we talked about, and pretty much everything in the world has been impacted. What used to take you a day to purchase now could take you a week, a month, maybe more than that. So again, all of those things tie back together.
Yeah, great comments. The only part that I would add to that is, don't ignore things like accounts receivable and accounts payable, because those are assets and liabilities that are available to you to manage. Wholesale distributors historically have operate on very thin margins, so you really want to leverage any and every asset the best way you possibly can.
Absolutely. Thank you for that one, David. I totally missed that one out on my part.
I knew when we talked earlier you'd mentioned that, so I thought it was a great point. I'm not going to take credit for it. It was yours. And the last one on our list, where would we be without profitability? So that's, we're in business to make money, right? So that really, and profitability could be based on gross margin, it could be net profit, it could be gross profit, it could be EBITDA. There are a lot of different definitions for profitability. And I think this is one where, you may have this at different levels, and it's important to have it at different levels. But certainly in some manner, you need to have a KPI around profitability, so that you understand, everything that you're doing, are you really making money on it? Now, what I'd love to see is if you've got the capability to take profitability and start to analyze it by product line, by customer grouping. Now, what are those different ways to look at it that are relevant to your business, so that I know you may intentionally have what they sometimes call a loss leader, but I may have, a group of customers or products that, I'm really not making a lot of money on. It pays the electric bills, as you used to say, but it's not where but I absolutely need it because it's kind of a requirement to serve my customers. Okay, so how can I handle that more effectively so that I'm minimizing the expenses around doing that product line, and yet still take care of maximizing my other product lines? So, and it may also cause you to look at products and customers in a different way. You may have a customer or customer group out there that it's kind of very difficult customer, as we like to say, that requires a lot of effort, but that when you look at it, you realize, geez, this customer group is very profitable because we've got good margins on the pricing that we're charging. And, we have to do some extra things for them, but it's not really costly for us to do it. It just requires a little time and effort, but we can do it. So that profitability number is obviously where we all come back to, or start with, however you want to look at it. But it's obviously very key to how successful we are in running our businesses. So do you want to have anything you want to add to that, or any of the other 9 that we've talked about?
But Dave, I think you summed that up perfectly, right? Profitability. I think one of you mentioned about some customers, the cost of service associated with that customer. Sometimes some customers will require extra effort, but that's when you have to start thinking about a KPI, but you want to break it down. Maybe there is a customer is demanding, but they pay their bills on time. That's profitability for you. They require a higher level of service. Maybe there's other customers who are not very demanding, but they don't pay their bills enough. Again, so your AR is just sitting out there on that end. Again, there's a lot of different things that you have to start looking at on profitability. Key thing at the end of the day is all of the KPIs that we have talked about today, at the end of the day, kind of lead right into profitability. And also that profitability leads into going back into the other KPIs that we talked about.
Absolutely. So Kristen, I think that wraps up our discussion on the 10 KPIs, and I think you've got some additional information to share.
I do indeed. And thanks to both of you. Appreciate all of those insights. I know it's hard to bring it down to just 10 KPIs that we all love. So I appreciate the hard work on that. So we'll be moving on to Q&A in just a moment. You still have time to submit your questions. You can access the Q&A feature of Zoom by hovering your cursor over the bottom center of your webinar screen and clicking on the Q&A icon. As promised, I'd like to share some additional resources that are available to our audience that will provide more detail on our topic today. First, all attendees will receive early access to Ultra's latest eBrief Top 10 Distribution KPIs. Ultra's consulting team shares expert insights gained from real-world business transformation projects in the distribution industry. And then from our friends at Oracle NetSuite, we have Mind Your KPIs, top metrics product companies should be monitoring. Included in this white paper, you'll find insight on a set of key performance indicators that every product company should be monitoring consistently. I will send everyone an email following today's session with links to these free downloads, as well as a link to the recording of the session. All right, now we will go ahead and move on to Q&A. Our first question that we've got in, of these KPIs, what would you say are the most important?
So I'll take a shot at it, and then you can correct me.
So I'll just say that, Dave, I'll let you start on that one. I'm just going to say, I'll let you start by picking the best child, right?
Yeah. I've got 3. I'm not about to go down that road. 3 kids, that is. So, it is somewhat of an easy question to answer. Obviously, you start with profitability. I mean, that, I think, based on our comments at the end, I think you can't but help us starting there. That to me would be number 1 on the list. I think number 2, for me, number 2 is probably around the customer complaints, because it goes back to, we fight so hard, you fight so hard to get customers. You need to know whether they're happy or not. And if there's something that is not meeting their expectations, you should be aware of that and taking corrective action to fix that. So I think customer complaints is probably number 2 on my list. I would say the number 3rd one would be inventory accuracy. Based on either inventory accuracy of product located in a bin versus just, do I have the right product? It all goes back to customer satisfaction. So, profitability, how, are we making money? And 2, it's focused on our customers. Asad, what do you think about those?
I think I would rank them the same way on my part, right? Profitability is key. Again, any organization, any company, any distributor, the first thing they'll be looking for is, am I profitable? And directly correlated to that is the customer satisfaction / customer complaints, however you want to term that out on your part. Because if the customers are not happy, your profitability is going to go down because they're not coming back to you. And one of the things that could make them unhappy would be you not being able to provide them with the products that they need. So that's where the inventory accuracy comes right into play. So again, I think they're very much interrelated with each other.
Yep, totally agree.
All right, and we've got a related question. How do you build out KPIs for customer complaints, and what is the best way to track them?
Definitely. So, Chris, I think when you talk about customer complaints, right, there's many different ways that it can be done. First thing you have to analyze is what are your sales channels? What is your go-to-market strategy at that point? Are you going through counter sales? Are you going through direct sales? Are you going through an online channel? One of the things that if you kind of look at a lot of they'll pick on Amazon one more time for the day. I don't know if this is the last time, but they'll still pick on them. A lot of the times is you'll order something and 2 or 3 days after you'll get an email notification. Hey, are you satisfied with the product or not? And it's not only for the product itself, it's about how the product is. Was it delivered to you correctly? Was it delivered to you on time? Was there anything broken? Well, again, whatever that needs to be. One of the questions that you should always ask is that, would you recommend working with us or buying from us again? Again, that will give you one of the key things that they'll give you is like, is this customer going to just walk away? They're one and done. If they're one and done, what are the things that we can do to bring them back into the fold and having them purchase more from us? If they say they're going to be purchasing again from us, that's when you start going into making sure that you're marketing to them at the right frequency, because you'll start noticing that the customer satisfaction, and I want to get away from the term customer complaints because that's a negative connotation to that. But when you start looking for customer satisfaction, that's when you start seeing, hey, there's a satisfied customer. I should be going after that again and again, over and over, and trying to win them back in. So there's a couple of different ways to look at that. One of the other things when you start looking at building out this KPI, customer satisfaction is not one and done kind of a thing, right? This exercise needs to be repeated consistently so that you're able to track over the course of time on how your company or your organization is doing. When you are small, when you're nimble, are you giving them extra attention? When you get big, do you start losing focus on that? If you are, that means at that point that's going to bring in, hey, we need to have more help around us, and start seeing, hey, we need to hire more people who are going to be able to manage those accounts. Again, from sales, you also start thinking about account management on your end. So again, it impacts that aspect of it for you as well on that side. And again, there are different other metrics to look at, but I think consistency is very key when you start thinking about building out customer satisfaction or complaint KPIs on your part.
Yeah, and what I'd add is, establishing the reason codes for why they're coming back. It does, it's customer satisfaction, but is that product getting returned? So now I've got a reverse logistics opportunity that I'm fighting with. It's affecting my profitability. So it kind of goes back to an understanding what's causing it. Is it mispicks? Is it just a finicky customer that's not happy about anything, or their buying isn't very good and they're always returning stuff that they may have not bought appropriately? It's really getting down to understanding what's driving it, so that you can, to Assad's point, you can address it with the customer. You need to kick up your marketing plan, or maybe there's some mispicks. Maybe you need to do some additional audits on your dock before the product goes out. I've even had clients who take pictures of the load. They've had customers that were constantly complaining about damaged product and the load looked terrible, and they were the first delivery on the truck. And so we were taking pictures of the load before it left and showing how it was braced in, it was nicely wrapped, and it looked really good. And, the drivers would open it up and take pictures and like, yeah, it still looks good. We don't know what the problem with what they're complaining about. So it gives you some places to start to have constructive dialogue with your customers, whether it's on your side or their side, but having that information is really, really important.
All right, thanks to both of you. And it looks like we've got time for one more question. And this is a fun one. I imagine you're both going to want to jump in on this. So you gave us 10 KPIs. How do we get started?
Definitely. Again, it's a hard one to pick, right? Do we start with profitability? Do we start with inventory? Do we start with customer satisfaction / complaints? I think one of the key things that you have to start thinking about is, I'll just pick one, right? Customer satisfaction, because I spoke about that a little bit earlier. You have to kind of start building the process in there, and then you also have to start thinking about building out a benchmark on those processes there, right? Where is it critical for me to start stepping in and start evaluating and auditing my process to make sure that the customers are satisfied? If they're satisfied, what are the aspects of it that are working? So you have to kind of start thinking about what are the ranges in your industry. When you start talking about consumer goods, that's a different range, right? So you can start looking at what they call is a net promoter score on that part. So percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detectors that are out there on that part. If that falls below, say, 45% or so in the consumer world, it's acceptable. And you can take I think that even the study points that out. You'll look at the German consumers; they tend to buy a lot, so they'll buy 3 products to keep 1 and send back 2. Again, that's a very common practice that's out there. That's not a very common practice out here in the US. And people tend to buy what they want and only return the goods that they want to return on there. If you're more in the digital world, if you're in the high-tech world, as we will call it in NetSuite, 50+% is where you want it to be. But if you're in the satellite or the cable world, it is okay to be below 10%. Those my Spectrum internet companies tends to say it differently.
Yeah, and what I'd add, kind of slightly different perspective, is the benchmarking part of it. So once you define what KPIs you want to use, exactly how you're going to, how are you going to measure, how are you going to collect that data consistently, who's going to own that process, and maybe you split it up amongst the executive team and everybody takes a KPI and they figure out, well, exactly how are we going to get this out of our system. If you have a modern ERP system, it's pretty easy to get that data out of. If you've got a more antiquated one, or you rely very heavily on something like Excel to actually collect that, collect productivity information, it may be a little bit more difficult. But what's the process for collecting it, and then how do I evaluate it, right? So it's benchmarking, and you can benchmark it and see, well, what's average in our industry for a specific, like throughput or revenue per employee, or any of the KPIs. You also want to look at who's best in class. Maybe it's not even in your industry, but it's understanding who's best in class, and that's what you want to be striving for. None of us want to be average. We all want to exceed being average. And by looking at the best in class, look at how they do it. How do they measure it? How did they get there? What's different about their business? But what's in their business that you could have bring back and apply to your own operations? I think that aspect is really important. And then you're starting to really leverage the benefit of having those KPIs and establishing goals for continually getting better.
From all of us here at Ultra, thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our experts, Assad and Dave, for sharing your expertise. We'd like to wish everyone a great rest of your day, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.